Been a little more than a year now since two of the biggest superstars in Hollywood, Brad Pitt.
No immediate comment from Pitt's attorney when they were approached for comment.
Brad Pitt's confession that Jennifer Aniston was the love of his life and that he regrets their divorce reverberates as one of those cultural moments that seems to pause time. For decades, the world has followed their story. Two luminous figures at the center of Hollywood who once embodied the idea of perfect romance. Their relationship, their marriage, and their eventual separation became part of the collective imagination, lingering in tabloid headlines, whispered conversations, and endless speculation. Now, with Pitt acknowledging what many long suspected, the narrative takes on a depth and poignancy that extends far beyond celebrity gossip. It becomes a story about love, regret, human frailty, and the enduring power of memory. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. From the very beginning, their connection had the sheen of something extraordinary. When Brad and Jennifer appeared together at premieres, charity events, and award shows, they projected a sense of partnership that looked effortless. She, with her Golden Girl image shaped in part by her success on Friends, and he, already one of the most bankable leading men in Hollywood, seemed almost destined to converge. Their wedding was celebrated not just as a private union, but as a public spectacle, photographed, analyzed, and admired. They were the couple people pointed to when trying to imagine how beauty, success, and charm might intersect in real life. For a time, their marriage became a reference point for an ideal that transcended the industry, a symbol of what many people wanted for themselves. That is precisely why the unraveling of their marriage was so startling. Divorce is common in Hollywood, and the public is often conditioned to expect it. But when Brad and Jennifer announced their separation, the reaction went beyond surprise. It felt like a rupture. For years afterward, the reasons behind it were endlessly debated. Speculation about outside influences, personal ambitions, and the incompatibility of lives lived in such a glaring spotlight took on the quality of myth-making. The story ceased to be theirs alone and instead became a cultural touchstone, one people returned to as shorthand for heartbreak, betrayal, and the fragility of even the most seemingly perfect relationships. Now, with Pitt's confession, there is a sense of closure that paradoxically opens new questions. To admit that Jennifer was the love of his life is not merely to acknowledge affection, it is to rewrite the narrative that has hovered over both of them since their separation. Regret implies recognition of loss, an awareness that what once seemed irretrievable was in fact irreplaceable. This is not the language of nostalgia alone. It is the language of truth spoken with the weight of hindsight. For Brad, a man whose career has been defined by transformations, this personal revelation carries more gravity than any performance. It shows vulnerability, humility, and the unvarnished acknowledgement of having let something extraordinary slip away. The cultural implications are immense. For years, observers have debated the idea of soulmates, wondering whether Brad and Jennifer might secretly remain tied to each other in some unspoken way. His admission gives voice to what countless fans hoped was true, that their love was not just a passing chapter, but the defining story of his emotional life. It transforms their history from mere Hollywood lore into something more universal, more human. Anyone who has ever regretted a decision, who has ever lost a love they later realized was central to their being, can see themselves reflected in his words. Suddenly, Brad Pitt is no longer simply the movie star. He is the man who admits that love, once found, is not so easily replaced. The regret also deepens the public's perception of Jennifer Aniston. Throughout the years, she has been cast in different roles by the media: the scorned ex-wife, the resilient career woman, the comedic darling, the beacon of independence. Brad's confession reframes her, placing her at the center of a love story that he himself declares to be the most important of his life. It underscores the respect and admiration that perhaps always lingered, even when circumstances pulled them apart. For Jennifer, this acknowledgement functions less as validation, since she never required it, and more as a testament to the profound impression she made on someone who once shared her world so intimately. At the same time, the timing of such a confession cannot be ignored. After decades of silence, why now? The answer lies partly in the way time transforms memory. In the immediacy of separation, emotions can be raw, pride can override honesty, and circumstances can obscure clarity. But years later, with careers established, families formed, and public perception less urgent, reflection becomes possible. Pitt's words seem to come not from a place of trying to rewrite history for advantage, but from the recognition that silence has its limits. At some point, truths need to be spoken, even if they serve no other purpose than acknowledgement. To admit that Jennifer was the love of his life is to grant himself the freedom of honesty and to release the weight of unspoken regret. The implications also ripple outward into how we perceive relationships in general. So often, society frames love stories in terms of permanence. If it lasts forever, it was real. If it ends, it must not have been. Brad's confession challenges this binary. It suggests that a relationship can end and yet remain the most profound, defining connection of a lifetime. It is a reminder that love is not diminished by its impermanence, nor is it invalidated by divorce. If anything, the depth of his regret emphasizes how indelible such connections can be. This redefines how people might think about their own experiences of love and loss, shifting the focus away from duration and toward meaning. For fans who followed their story from the late 1990s into the early 2000s, the confession reopens a chapter they never quite closed. It rekindles the image of Brad and Jennifer walking hand in hand on red carpets, laughing together at interviews, supporting each other in public. Those memories, once tinged with sadness because of their ending, now acquire a different resonance. They are no longer just artifacts of a relationship that failed, but evidence of a love that, even in its absence, remained unmatched. In this way, Pitt's words retroactively change the emotional color of their history, painting it with tenderness instead of tragedy. The confession also speaks to the broader theme of how people evolve in public. Both Brad and Jennifer have lived much of their adult lives under scrutiny, their choices dissected, their private pain made public. For him to admit regret in such a way is to peel back the protective layer that fame often requires. It is to show that beneath the glamour and the roles, there exists the same vulnerability, the same longing, the same mistakes that mark ordinary human lives. This alignment of celebrity experience with universal emotion bridges the gap between star and spectator, allowing audiences to see themselves more clearly in the stories of those they admire. From a narrative standpoint, Brad's confession almost feels cinematic. It carries the weight of irony, the pull of unfulfilled love, and the bittersweet recognition that some truths emerge only too late. It invites speculation about what might have been had circumstances unfolded differently, and whether the acknowledgement itself serves as a kind of redemption. The beauty of this revelation lies not in what it promises for the future, but in what it reveals about the past. That love once given leaves a mark that time cannot erase. Even the framing of the confession as one of regret adds layers of meaning. Regret is not just sadness, it is the acknowledgement of agency. It means understanding that choices made, actions taken, paths followed led away from something irreplaceable. For Pitt to admit regret is to take responsibility, not to shift blame. It suggests an internal reckoning, a willingness to look squarely at what was lost, and to accept the role he played in that loss. Such accountability is rare in the public sphere, especially among figures of his stature, which is why it resonates so powerfully. It does not merely rewrite their story, it reshapes his image as a man willing to confront his own flaws. This confession also invites contemplation of how love stories endure in the cultural imagination. Decades after their divorce, the fascination with Brad and Jennifer has never faded, a testament to the symbolic power they held. His acknowledgement reanimates that fascination, proving that the stories people invest in emotionally are not just entertainment, but reflections of their deepest hopes and fears. When he admits that she was the love of his life, it validates the investment of millions who always believed their bond was something extraordinary. It is as if the audience, too, receives confirmation of what they long intuited, that their love was not an illusion, but a reality that shaped both of their lives. The moment also prompts reflection on the interplay between destiny and choice. For years, fans have entertained the notion that Brad and Jennifer might somehow circle back to each other, drawn by an invisible tether. His confession, while not suggesting reunion, reinforces the idea that some connections defy explanation. Even when life diverges into separate paths, even when years accumulate, there are loves that remain central to who we are. To recognize Jennifer in this way is to acknowledge that certain people leave imprints so deep they cannot be undone. That truth, while personal to him, resonates universally. In admitting that Jennifer was the love of his life, Brad Pitt not only reframes his own story but offers a mirror to those who carry their own regrets. It becomes a reminder that love, once lost, continues to shape who we are and how we see the world. It is not erased by time, by fame, by success, or even by new relationships. Instead, it lingers, a quiet presence that waits to be acknowledged. His confession is an act of remembrance, of giving voice to what was always there, unspoken but undeniable. The confession transforms what had long been speculation into something more enduring. It is no longer about gossip, about who left whom or why, but about the universal truth that love defines us in ways we cannot always control. It shows that even those who seem to have everything, beauty, wealth, acclaim, are not immune to the tender ache of regret. In this way, Brad's words are not just about Jennifer Aniston. They are about everyone who has ever wondered what might have been, everyone who has ever carried the weight of a love that time could not erase. Brad Pitt's revelation that Jennifer Aniston was the love of his life and that he regrets their divorce opens a new horizon of interpretation that stretches far beyond what has already been said. To carry the conversation further, one has to examine not only the cultural fascination with their relationship, but also the psychological, social, and symbolic dimensions embedded in this confession. It becomes a prism through which broader themes about human nature, memory, desire, and the endurance of love can be explored. The layer to consider is the psychological one. Regret, especially when tied to matters of the heart, carries a unique burden. It is not the kind of regret associated with a lost investment or a missed opportunity. It digs into the self, reminding a person of the vulnerability of human choices. For Brad, to acknowledge Jennifer as the love of his life means he has confronted the deepest recesses of his own emotional history. It suggests sleepless nights, moments of reflection during solitude, and perhaps flashes of memory during quiet pauses on film sets or in the spaces of everyday life where absence becomes a palpable presence. The psychology of regret is cruel because it pairs longing with finality, and Pitt's admission reveals that he has lived with that duality for years. This also invites reflection on the nature of timing in relationships. Love may be profound, but timing often determines its survival. When Brad and Jennifer were together, they were at the peaks of their careers, constantly under scrutiny, with demands pulling them in different directions. The machinery of fame placed them under relentless pressure, and the choices made within that context were not entirely personal. They were influenced by agents, studios, publicists, and a global audience that always seemed to have a stake in their marriage. Pitt's acknowledgement can be seen as an admission that he let external pressures eclipse the essence of what he had. The timing that once seemed opportune was, in fact, not conducive to nurturing what he now recognizes as irreplaceable. The social dimension is equally revealing. Celebrities often serve as mirrors for society's fantasies, hopes, and disappointments. In confessing his regret, Brad is not only speaking for himself, but also articulating something millions of people feel yet rarely admit. Society often demands a forward momentum in relationships. Find someone new, move on, bury the past. Yet his words defy that expectation. They validate the idea that some loves are not meant to be gotten over. Instead, they remain with us, shaping our identities long after the relationship itself has ended. This perspective is liberating for those who carry regrets of their own. It tells them that holding on to love, even in its absence, is not a weakness, but a deeply human truth. Symbolically, Brad's confession repositions his entire life narrative. For decades, his identity has been tied to his status as a leading man and cultural icon, defined as much by his roles on screen as by his romances off it. His relationship with Jennifer has always lingered as a central chapter in that story. To acknowledge her as the love of his life means elevating that chapter above all others. It transforms their marriage from a failed union into the defining anchor of his emotional existence. This symbolic gesture reverberates through the way people will remember both of them, cementing their relationship as the cornerstone of Brad's personal mythology. It is also worth examining how memory functions in this context. Memory is not static. It evolves over time, reshaping the past through the lens of the present. Brad's confession demonstrates how memory can soften edges, highlight what mattered most, and strip away the noise of circumstance. Over the years, what may have been overshadowed by conflict or tension has likely receded, leaving behind the glowing core of connection and intimacy. For him, remembering Jennifer as the love of his life is not simply a statement of fact. It is a statement of how memory prioritizes meaning over detail. It is about what lingers, not what fades. The confession also compels a closer look at masculinity and vulnerability. For decades, Brad Pitt has been a figure of strength, charisma, and desirability. He has embodied the archetype of the leading man who rarely falters. Yet, by admitting regret and placing Jennifer at the center of his emotional truth, he dismantles that archetype. He shows that masculinity can coexist with vulnerability, that strength is not diminished by acknowledging love and loss. In a cultural landscape where men are often discouraged from expressing deep regret or longing, Pitt's words challenge those conventions. They invite men to see that admitting love lost is not weakness but courage. The ripple effect extends into the cultural construction of Jennifer Aniston herself. For years, she has carried the narrative of being defined by heartbreak, unfairly typecast in the public eye as the woman left behind. Yet Brad's confession restores her agency. It reframes her not as someone discarded, but as the person whose love was so significant that even decades later, it remains unmatched. This shifts her position in the cultural imagination. She becomes the embodiment of lasting impact, of the kind of love that withstands time and regret. The dignity with which she has carried herself through the years now resonates even more profoundly in light of his acknowledgement. There is also a philosophical layer worth considering. Love is often imagined as eternal, yet human relationships rarely align with that ideal. Pitt's confession suggests that love can indeed be eternal in essence, even if not in form. Their marriage ended, but his love endures, preserved in the recognition that nothing has ever equaled it. This challenges the notion that love must be continuous to be valid. Instead, it positions love as something that transcends duration, as an experience that imprints itself permanently regardless of circumstance. For philosophers of love, this confession echoes age-old questions about whether love is defined by its longevity or by its depth. The confession further highlights the tension between private truth and public persona. For years, Brad maintained silence or carefully curated comments about his past with Jennifer. His eventual openness is a recognition that some truths cannot remain buried forever. In breaking that silence, he disrupts the carefully managed image that has followed him, choosing instead to reveal something deeply personal. This choice reflects the ongoing tension celebrities face between protecting their privacy and acknowledging the narratives that define them. His decision to speak suggests that authenticity, at least in this case, outweighed caution. One must also consider the narrative arc of Brad's life as a story. In storytelling, a revelation late in the plot often changes how the entire narrative is understood. His admission functions like that. It forces audiences to reinterpret the past, to revisit old photographs, interviews, and red carpet appearances with new eyes. It is as if a hidden truth has been revealed, altering the meaning of everything that came before. What once seemed like ordinary snapshots of a celebrity marriage now become sacred fragments of the love that defined his life. The confession resonates on a generational level as well. For many who grew up in the 1990s and early 2000s, Brad and Jennifer's relationship was not just celebrity news, it was part of the cultural fabric of their youth. To hear decades later that their love was as real and defining as it seemed gives that generation a kind of closure, even validation. It affirms that the emotional investment they placed in following the couple's story was not misplaced. Their fascination, their hope for reconciliation, their sadness at the divorce, all of it is now reframed as rooted in something true. The implications also stretch into the realm of art and storytelling itself. Artists often create their most moving work when fueled by personal truth. Pitt's acknowledgement of regret could be seen as part of the emotional reservoir that informs his craft. When he portrays characters grappling with loss, longing, or the weight of choices, one might now wonder if these performances are colored by his lived experience of loving and losing Jennifer. In this way, his personal confession and his professional work become intertwined, blurring the line between life and art. From a societal perspective, this moment underscores the importance of honesty in reshaping narratives. For decades, silence allowed speculation to reign, leaving fans and media to invent their own versions of why things ended. With his confession, Brad reclaims authorship of his own story. He offers a definitive truth, however late, that dismantles decades of rumor. This demonstrates the power of honesty, not only to heal personal wounds, but also to clarify public perception. It is a reminder that silence may protect in the short term, but truth has the power to endure. The confession also carries spiritual undertones. Love, regret, and acknowledgement are deeply spiritual experiences because they touch the essence of what it means to be human. For Brad to say that Jennifer was the love of his life suggests that, on some level, he views their connection as transcendent. It implies that she was not just a partner, but a soul companion, someone whose presence shaped his journey in ways that cannot be undone. In many traditions, such a connection is seen as evidence of a soulmate, someone whose impact is destined, inevitable, and eternal. His confession resonates with that spiritual longing for a love that defies explanation. Furthermore, the public's response to this revelation is part of the story. People are not merely passive consumers of celebrity news. They interpret, project, and internalize these narratives. Pitt's confession allows people to revisit their own lives, to ask themselves who their love of my life might be, and whether they harbor regrets of their own. It creates a collective reflection, a moment where private lives are quietly compared to the story of two Hollywood figures. The universality of regret, of longing, of unspoken love becomes magnified through the lens of Brad's words. The economics of celebrity cannot be ignored either. For decades, Brad and Jennifer's relationship has been a profitable story for tabloids, magazines, and entertainment networks. His confession reignites that narrative, ensuring that their story will continue to be told, dissected, and analyzed. Yet this time, the story is no longer built on rumor but on his own truth. It marks a shift from exploitation to authenticity, turning a tabloid saga into a human drama with depth. The legacy of their relationship is also reshaped. Until now, it has been remembered as a beautiful but failed union, overshadowed by the circumstances of its ending. With his words, it is transformed into something eternal, a love story that transcended failure and lived on in memory. Legacy is not about what ends, but about what remains. And Brad's confession ensures that what remains of his relationship with Jennifer is not sorrow, but acknowledgement of its unmatched significance. Even the silence of Jennifer herself in the face of such a confession becomes part of the narrative. Whether she responds or not, her position is elevated. She becomes the subject of a confession that requires nothing from her in return. Her dignity, independence, and quiet strength only amplify the weight of his words. She does not need to speak for the confession to matter. The acknowledgement itself is enough to confirm the power of her presence in his life. Brad Pitt's confession that Jennifer Aniston was the love of his life and that he regrets their divorce opens yet another avenue of exploration when considered through the lens of how society constructs stories of love and permanence. Beyond the emotional and cultural significance already addressed, there is the broader issue of how such revelations become collective myths. Myths, in this sense, are not falsehoods, but stories that gain a symbolic life beyond the individuals at their center. Brad's words, simple as they may seem, now function as a myth-making gesture that ensures his relationship with Jennifer will never be remembered as ordinary. It becomes a cautionary tale, a love story, a reflection of human vulnerability, and an enduring reminder of what it means to let go of something invaluable. The mythic quality lies in the way people attach meaning to their story. In popular imagination, Brad and Jennifer were once the golden couple, representatives of beauty, success, and compatibility. Their separation was not just the ending of a marriage, but the collapse of an ideal. Now, with Brad admitting his regret, the myth shifts again. The story is no longer about failure. It is about eternal love that survives separation. Their relationship, though finite in practice, takes on an infinite dimension in memory and confession. It joins the ranks of those stories, real or fictional, that people turn to when trying to understand love's complexities, like Gatsby yearning for Daisy or Odysseus longing for Penelope. But with the difference that this is no novel or epic. It is life lived in real time. Another perspective worth examining is how this confession highlights the limitations of success as a substitute for love. Brad Pitt has achieved nearly everything possible in his profession: accolades, awards, financial security, and cultural relevance. Yet none of those achievements erase the space Jennifer occupies in his emotional history. This juxtaposition between external success and internal regret reminds people that no measure of accomplishment can substitute for the loss of deep human connection. His career milestones shine brightly, but they do not fill the void left by a love that he now recognizes as singular. For the audience, it is a sobering reminder that fulfillment in life cannot be measured solely by professional triumphs or material gains. It must also account for love, intimacy, and emotional truth. This also ties into the way regret reconfigures identity. A person's sense of self is built not only on what they achieve, but also on the relationships they nurture. For Brad to declare Jennifer as the love of his life is to acknowledge that she has been part of his identity all along, even in her absence. He may have lived separate chapters, formed other relationships, and redefined himself in countless ways. But at the core, her presence has remained central. His confession suggests that identity is not fixed but fluid, shaped as much by what we lose as by what we gain. It highlights how regret can carve itself into one's self-image, becoming part of the fabric of who we are. There is also an element of moral reflection in Brad's words. Regret, when admitted publicly, carries a moral weight because it implies accountability. He is not deflecting, not placing blame on circumstance or others. Instead, he is acknowledging his role in the ending of something precious. This act of taking responsibility is powerful because it reframes the story of their separation. It shifts it from being a tale of two people who grew apart into a narrative of one person realizing too late that his choices carried irreversible consequences. Morally, this serves as a reminder of the gravity of decisions made in love and the way those decisions reverberate long after the moment has passed. On another level, the confession can be interpreted as an exploration of the human relationship with time. Time is relentless, moving forward regardless of our desires, but it also has the power to transform perspective. In his younger years, Brad may not have fully understood what he had with Jennifer. In the immediacy of fame and the whirlwind of life, it is easy to take for granted what feels permanent. Only with the passing of time, decades in this case, does the truth emerge with clarity. His words underscore how time, while often healing, also brings the sting of realization. It grants wisdom, but does not erase consequence. For Brad, time has been the mirror reflecting back the reality that what he lost was irreplaceable. Another lens is the concept of irreplaceability itself. In a culture where people are encouraged to move on, and where new relationships are often framed as cures for old wounds, Brad's admission stands as a counter-narrative. It declares that some people cannot be replaced, that their imprint is singular. Jennifer Aniston, in this narrative, is not just one of many loves, but the love, the one who set a standard that could never be matched. The idea of irreplaceability resonates because it confronts the modern illusion of endless options. It reminds people that while relationships may be many, some stand apart, engraved in the soul in a way that nothing else can erase. This raises questions about destiny and choice. If Jennifer was truly the love of Brad's life, was their separation a failure of destiny or a failure of choice? His confession suggests that it was choice, the decisions he made at the time, that diverted him from what could have been a lifelong union. Yet destiny reasserts itself in the fact that even decades later, he still names her as central. This paradox, the interplay of free will and fate, is one of the most enduring mysteries of human experience. His regret becomes a meditation on how lives unfold, how choices can obscure destiny, and how love sometimes persists regardless of the path taken. One cannot overlook the impact this revelation has on how we understand closure. For years, it may have seemed as though Brad and Jennifer had closed that chapter, each moving on to pursue different lives. His confession, however, disrupts that assumption. It shows that closure is not always neat or complete. Some stories refuse to end even when circumstances dictate otherwise. For him, the story of their love is ongoing, not in physical presence, but in emotional truth. This challenges the conventional wisdom that closure requires finality. Instead, it demonstrates that closure is often an illusion, and that some loves remain open-ended, continuing to shape lives in silence until they are finally spoken aloud. Brad's admission also carries symbolic significance in the way it confronts the illusion of control. He is a man who has commanded attention, controlled narratives through roles, and shaped his public image for decades. Yet, in this confession, he admits to something beyond his control, the enduring power of love and the persistence of regret. This humility in the face of forces larger than himself is striking because it strips away the illusion of invulnerability. It is a reminder that no amount of control or mastery can undo certain truths of the heart. There is also a generational resonance to consider. For those who were young adults when Brad and Jennifer were together, their story represented a modern fairy tale. Hearing now that she was the love of his life offers a poignant reminder of how time changes perspective. For younger generations, who may not have experienced their relationship firsthand, this confession introduces them to a story of love and regret that carries lessons about the complexity of relationships. It connects generations through a shared reflection on what it means to love deeply and lose profoundly. The confession also invites examination of silence as a form of communication. For decades, Brad said little publicly about Jennifer, letting silence serve as his response. That silence allowed speculation to flourish but also carried meaning of its own. It suggested restraint, perhaps respect, perhaps avoidance. Breaking that silence now gives new meaning to all those years. It shows that what was unsaid was not absence but weight, that silence itself was a form of acknowledgement. His decision to finally speak transforms silence into revelation, proving that what remains unsaid often holds the greatest truths. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Brad Pitt's confession about Jennifer Aniston? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.